A lot of commentators are arguing that the Russian offensive is coming, but it looks like the Russian offensive may actually be here. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's February 8th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get right into it. Okay, so when we look at the control map, you can see there are a couple of interesting developments. The first is, of course, Krasnohora. Ukrainian defending forces really do need to execute this withdrawal. I understand that they have this small canal still open to them. But I expect Ukrainian forces to conduct a controlled withdrawal here. We saw this similar in Lysychansk. This was right around the point where they started to systematically withdraw their forces to prevent encirclement. This is, of course, bad news because it's much easier to defend these urban areas than it is to hold these large open spaces. And even though, as we're probably going to talk about, Russia's taken a massive number of casualties to achieve it. They have effectively encircled Krasnohora, right, by simply being willing to assume casualties that most other militaries would balk at. They can effect an encirclement and not have to clear defenders out of these entrenched urban areas. And you can see this urban defensive line is something that the Ukrainian military is really trying to hold at all costs, because you can see that if they have to withdraw, right, their options are fairly limited as to where they can go. They could potentially set up defensive lines around here. They could simply try to hold like this roadway, which is probably the most important call they could make. But again, this is Krasnohora is not itself. It does not have any intrinsic value. Especially relative to this tactical situation where it's only provides access feeding pretty directly into Russian lines. So what they need to do instead is, of course, effect a withdrawal, find some other defensive positions. This is something that they should have done the analysis on already. And have been prepared for probably for a few days at least. And they should be able to establish new defensive lines. What else we see is, of course, small gains, right? The old block by block method of fighting through Bakhmut. This is, again, part of a potentially effective strategy for Ukraine of maximizing casualties and minimizing, or rather increasing the price per square kilometer of Ukrainian territory for Russia to a point of unsustainability. You can also see, right, Russia advancing towards Ivansky, but still somewhat reluctant to cross these big open fields. You can see they've made it about halfway across these fields now. The danger, of course, if they can take Ivansky, then they will have effectively cut off at least one of the major roads going into Bakhmut from Chasiv Yar. The other one somewhat to the north and not currently at risk. But as you guys can see, Russia's plan to encircle Bakhmut is being executed, is coming to fruition. And I worry about President Zelensky's statements that, Bakhmut's a fortress, Bakhmut's a symbol, et cetera, et cetera. You can't let these sort of symbolic or morale values cloud good military judgment. And at the end of the day, you can see in the grand scheme of things, Bakhmut is one town of many in this region. It doesn't hold any special significance to Ukraine. It's useful only in so much as it is a place to maximize Russian casualties. And there is no doubt that the Ukrainian armed forces have done that. They have effectively tied up a huge number of Russian forces. They have I suspect probably eliminated the Wagner group as an effective military force. And have forced the Russian military to divert some of their best troops away from any other offensive efforts into this meat grinder. So no matter, even if they withdrew from Bakhmut tomorrow, we would still call the Battle of Bakhmut in some ways a mixed bag at best, and maybe even a Ukrainian victory given the price they've paid. When we look over, there's one other piece of very interesting change to the battlefield, and that is right here. You guys can see that the Russian forces have taken the town of Vodiane, Optine, fully and are expanding outward. You can see it's probably part of an effort maybe to encircle this Avdiivka, but it's interesting simply because the fighting around Donetsk city has been much, much slower than we've seen in the Bakhmut region. And it is a testament, honestly, I think, to just sheer volume. And when we look over at the combat map, you see what I'm talking about. Literally, I have not seen this level of Russian offensive work in this entire war. Short of, well, I'm sorry, that's not true. Not seen this level of offensive work in at least several months, probably since the initial invasion. You can see here they're attacking in different locations around Volodar. You can see here they are actually reporting 2 separate offensive efforts all along these 3 regions outside of Donetsk. They're also trying to conduct this encirclement of Avdiivka. In the north, you can see that basically every point they've advanced in and around Bakhmut, they're pushing into Chasiv Yar, Ivansky, Bakhmut, trying to complete their encirclement of Krasnohora, trying to take Krasnohora itself, pushing outward towards Sako Vanzetti, and continuing north. It's almost an unbroken line as they try to conduct an encirclement at Bilohorivka, and even to the north here, you can see 3 other axes occurring in the Kreminna-Lyman front. So I really think that there's good evidence that while some of these attacks are likely feints and efforts to divert the Ukrainian forces and make it easier and pin all Ukrainian forces across the line in place. This is what you would do here. You would actually, by attacking simultaneously almost everywhere you can, Ukrainian forces are going to get locked into place. It's going to be hard to withdraw units and reposition them. It's going to be hard to even bring units forward into an active fight. So by doing this, they're locking the line in place, and I suspect my theory is that this Kreminna offensive is the big dog, the real one. This in Volodar is probably a false probing attack or feint. And the question, of course, Bakhmut and Donetsk City are which of these, if any, are going to be turned into the real attack. I think probably they're going to see them continue to push in Bakhmut. They're so close to affecting their encirclement. If they can force the withdrawal from Krasnohora and continue to advance somewhat, they will actually have be able to threaten this main roadway here, which, as you guys can see, there's only 2 ways out of Bakhmut, and it's these 2 roadways, and they need to make sure that Russia wants to cut both of them off from Ukrainian forces. So I think that that's what you'll see. It doesn't really look like there's any sort of big break in the Ukrainian lines outside of Donetsk. So that's my thesis. That this is actually the major offensive effort. That's why, Ukraine recently reported that they estimate that they have killed 1,000 Russian troops in a single day. That's a tremendous number of KIA. And you can usually assume in this conflict that another 2 to 3 times are WIA. So again, a total of about 3,000 Russian troops taken out of the fight in just 24 hours of fighting. And so I think it's hard to argue. It's hard to see these and believe that this constitutes Russia waiting to take to the offensive. Their time is running out if they really do want to achieve some effects by the end of March. So that's why I really do believe that this may be marking the start of their major offensive effort. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Of course, if you want to support the channel, be sure to check out the Patreon. I drop a new combat video every single week. Thanks to my Colonel and Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys are the ones who make this whole thing possible, and I'll see you guys in the next one.